apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Rory Major, Councillor Alex Furman, Councillor Louise Bown, Councillor Jill Haynes, Councillor James Vitale, Councillor Mike Parks, Councillor Val Pothecary, Councillor Cathy Lugg, Councillor Chris Kippax and Councillor Steve Robinson.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, that's okay. Item 2, any declarations of interest? Is that better? Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. No declarations of interest, so we move on to item 3. There are no public questions. Item 4, there are no petitions or deputations. Item 5, no questions from our councillors. So we move on to the important item, item 6. And can I say, first of all, this evening we have 2 conflicting positions. We have a paper from the Cabinet Member for Finance and Capital Strategy making recommendations that the Council should approve changes for both 2024 and 25 and 25 and 26 to its Treasury Management Strategy, the accompanying minimum revenue provision statement and the charging methodology. And we also have before us a recommendation from the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee that those recommendations should not be approved by Council and should instead be considered a part of the 2026-27 budget settings process. As the business tonight concerns a proposed change to the Council's budget framework, we'll approach the meeting as we would an ordinary budget debate, but with one change to enable the Chair of the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee to speak early in the debate. So I will be asking Councillor Clifford to present his report and propose the recommendations, after which I will ask if there is a seconder. We will then move to a debate in which I will invite Councillor Lacey Clark as Chair of the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee to speak first, followed by group leaders and then an opportunity for wider debate. As the recommendations from the Cabinet Member and the Place and Resources Committee are the reverse of each other, members will then have to decide whether to support Councillor Clifford's proposals by voting in favour or to support the Scrutiny Committee's recommendations by voting against Councillor Clifford's recommendations. As we will be voting on a proposed change to the budget framework, the vote will be taken as a recorded vote. So I will now invite Councillor Clifford.
Here we go. I had a birthday card yesterday which said, "You've reached the age where your back goes out more than you do." So if I appear to be sitting down and standing up a few more times, it's just to get a little bit of flexibility. I'm delighted to introduce this paper and I thank everyone for their attention and presence tonight. I know it's been an inconvenience for many people. I do appreciate it. This paper, in many ways, is a no-brainer. It's fairer for people now, it is justifiable for people in the future, for our council taxpayers, and it has the happy benefit of giving us a cash release. I'm tempted to sit down and say, it's just a no-brainer, it's such a sensible approach, but I suspect there may be 1 or 2 challenges to that. It is a technical paper, it is very much in the hands of our finance team, and they have prepared a statement, so I'll just go through the statement as I introduce this paper. It sets out changes to our approach to what's called the minimum revenue provision and asks you to ask me to recommend changes to the policy for how it sets aside money, reduce our capital finance requirement and fully finance this over an appropriate timescale. So this paper sets out where many local authorities look at their financial capital expenditure and with debt, they must set aside a sum of money each year to ensure that debt can be repaid. This is the minimum revenue provision, or MRP, as you'll see shorthand throughout the paper. For this to operate effectively, we should ensure that local authorities do not take on more debt than they can afford. So far, so sensible. Therefore, in deciding whether any capital expenditure is affordable, an authority must consider whether it can meet the cost of the MRP charged within their budget, and this amount should be determined with respect to a local authority's capital finance requirement. Effectively, we're saying you have to set aside money in order to be able to afford the borrowing that you're taking on. So, why the change? The change to this policy follows advice that we are currently excessively or ultra-prudent. This change remains prudent and finances our capital spending over an appropriate timescale which better reflects the underlying activity which has asked this council to take on the debt in the first place. I do apologise, it's technical. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions to explain. The primary of this policy then is to change to make a better prudent provision, and this remains compliant with all the statutory guidance that is both current now and is coming in the new financial year. So as we look to put forward this change, what I would ask everyone to reflect on is this has been pulled together by our finance team led by the Chief Finance Officer. They are experienced chartered accountants. They know their stuff. It has also gone to the Council's external Treasury management experts, our advisors, Arling Close. They appeared at the very effective scrutiny meeting that we had last week. It has also gone through King's Counsel. We've taken legal advice on whether the actions we're taking are supportable legally, and they are. And it has also taken initial guidance from our external auditors, Grant Thornton. Just to cover all bases, if this is approved, there will be a cash benefit to this council, round about £6 million just over. We will be putting that into a reserve to be held until a full audit, financial audit of this council is held. If by some bizarre circumstance it is recommended that we don't proceed with that, taking that £6 million, it will be returned. So we will be in a position where everything we're doing is reversible. If the opposition parties decide they don't like the sound of it, it is a reversible policy that should they gain power in 4 years' time, they can then take that action and turn it back. So the recommendations are that borrowing before 2008 is brought in line, sorry, when I say borrowing, is brought in line with our current policy, which is to spread that burden over 40 years. I've been trying to work out whether I can phrase this, because having listened to the Audit Committee and the extensive debate not the Audit Committee, I do apologise, the Scrutiny Committee, an extensive debate that took part there, people seem to get stuck in a log jam of trying to work out where our buildings were, whether their values would be the same, what kind of improvements they might need, have we done inspections. This is not about buildings, and that's the thing I would implore you all to try to get past. This is about our assets. For instance, the MRP will be setting aside money for a whole capital programme. That includes all sorts of things other than buildings. For instance, our road network. The road surfacing that takes place, that is one of our assets. The coastal defences we put in place, they are our assets. If we build a school, they are the assets. So it is not just some buildings that you might have to, in order to focus on what MRP means. It is not taking a 25-year mortgage and turn it into a 40-year mortgage. It is far more complex than that. If you take areas like a gritter lorry, the road surface, a community centre that gets built, a school, coastal defences, if you put those in an entire basket and then say, what's the average lifespan on that? We are saying now we're moving that from 25 to 40 years. It's the whole. It is an average figure for the whole of our assets. And I hope that explanation might be useful for those who are at scrutiny, where it clearly was difficult to work out where the liabilities might lie. So we have the recommendations in front of us. I know there are going to be many questions coming. For me, this is a sensible approach that is fairer and prudent in the way we look across our assets. We spread them over 40 years, as we're doing with our current policy. We look at the way that we finance it, and then which will be fixed interest rates, so there's no risk of massive interest rate fluctuations, and it keeps us solid and very, very easy to understand where we're going to be and how we can do our financial planning. And yeah, with everything like this, there are going to be benefits and there are going to be negatives. The negatives in this are that in the end, after 25 to 40 years, the council taxpayers of that time will be paying where nowadays they won't. Well, in one way, why aren't they? Because they should be paying for assets they're going to be using. The second reason is because we're fixing costs. £1 million we set today, in 40 years' time, although it would be £1 million, it will not have the same value. Inflation would have taken an enormous chunk out of it. And just think back, if you go back to 1985 and think what £1 million would buy you then, a house in Sandbanks, £1 million now, you might get a partial sea view in downtown Weymouth, if you're lucky. That's how things change. £1 million house in £1 million to buy the same £1 million house in Sandbanks, you're probably looking at 10, 15 million. So there are negatives, as with all these things. They are explainable, but the whole thing, this whole paper is all about fairness. It's making it fair that council taxpayers now are not overpaying and council taxpayers in the future are not paying anything at all. It's spreading it out, it's smoothing it, and it has the happy circumstance of delivering very significant savings to this council over a couple of decades. So with that, Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendations and also take any questions. And I'm very interested to hear from the Chairman of Scrutiny, who I thought was a challenging but a successful meeting on the whole.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Nick Island, Crossways Ward, I'm very happy to second this paper and I will reserve my right to speak at the end.
So we'll now move on to the debate. And can I just mention, you can only speak once during the debate, and we'll be timed, the Vice Chair will time you for 3 minutes. So we'll start with Councillor Lacey Clark.
Chairman, as I was given no notice that I'll be called upon to speak first, I will defer myself to speak at the end. Thank you instead.
Thank you. We move on to group leaders then. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Let's have a moment of honesty in the chamber on this one. The reason this is with us now is that there is an imminent change in legislation that wouldn't permit you to put this forward and the same proposals as the paper today in just a matter of a few weeks' time. Now, we've had many conversations across the chamber and there's a wide consensus that local governments aren't funded particularly well by central government. So when central government hears from all parties that actually there's something wrong in the mechanism of local government funding, and they remove one of those levers at very short notice, it makes you think that this can't be a good idea, because surely, if it was a great idea, they wouldn't be removing it as a way for councils to manage their books. They'd be promoting it. They'd be encouraging us. And so I asked around and said, well, where's this policy being used? And they said, oh, it's being used in Somerset. I said, what, Somerset Council, the one that burnt £100 million of reserves, is rolling out a forced programme of redundancies, massive cuts to services. That's Somerset Council. That's where this little trick's being used. I went, yes. Oh, right, OK. Let's not go down that road then. And then, when the cat did get out the bag, we were told that what this will do for this council's reputation is it will remove us from being seen as very prudent. It will decrease that level. If we're lucky, to just prudent. If it's the slippery slope to other measures, who knows where that will end. So, Madam Chairman, I think the clear steer from this group is this has been rushed through at breakneck speed. I'm sorry that the Cabinet member wasn't available to the Scrutiny Committee last week. We've heard a couple of things from him tonight that I don't think were actually mentioned in the paper, so I don't take particularly kind to policy on the hoof. And, Madam Chairman, one further appeal to you. Since the budget, there have been a number of announcements of policy, including one on nighttime parking charges that was made on social media. Could you remind the Cabinet, please, that the correct place to announce policy would be in this chamber for all members to comment on, please?
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Can I move on to Councillor Sutton now, as Leader of the Greens?
Thank you, Chair. My response to this is quite simple, really. So the expert advice that we've received is that we are being excessively prudent. This has been discussed at length with senior officers, as Simon says, qualified accountants, with external Treasury management experts, with our external auditors, Grant Thornton, and just, belt and braces run past the King's Counsel. So with all these assurances, I don't really see where the problem is. And I can't help thinking, I don't want to party politicise this, but I think, in all honesty, had your party received this advice from these expert sources, I think you probably would have been taking the same course. That's only an opinion, but that's what I tend to think. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to Councillor Fry for the Independents.
Thank you, Chair. Finance is not my forte at all. I don't really progress to know all about this paper, but I did take advice from the finance officer and was reassured by the advice and guidance that I was given. Suitable advice has been sought from all the finance experts, the companies and the regulator, and that for me is good enough for me, so I will be supporting this paper.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to Councillor Weller.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Well, finance isn't my forte either, but I've read this paper, reread it, and then read it again, and spoken to as many people as possible for advice. And I actually like prudent, and I actually quite like over-prudent. And at the risk of being thought unambitious, I think I will continue to stay on the side of prudence. As a former Prime Minister and Chancellor always said, Prudence is a nice person. We should stick with Prudence. And the analogy of a basket of assets actually was very unhelpful as far as I'm concerned, because when I put a basket of assets there and I've got the £1 million and the gritter, I know I don't want to finance a gritter over 40 years. I don't want to finance my car over 40 years. So that was unhelpful. As for the disparaging remark about downtown Weymouth and what you could get for £1 million, I found that somewhat offensive, I'm afraid, particularly from a councillor who represents Weymouth.
Thank you. Now, we've heard from the group leaders, and I think there were one or two questions. Would Councillor Clifford like to answer the questions before we open the debate further?
Thank you, Chair. A little bit of clarity. Councillor Parry says that the statutory guidance is about to change, which means we are rushing it through. No. Under the new statutory guidance, this is still perfectly acceptable, and so there's no rush on that at all. The only rush is for whether we can apply it for this financial year, which is why we called a special meeting. He also had a pop at Somerset Council, got his facts wrong there again. Somerset Council has not gone down an MRP route. Somerset County Council went down an MRP route, which was many years beforehand. Just prudent, well, that's a word to be used. You know, we're moving from ultra or excessive to just prudent. Well, I'm quite happy with just prudent. And we did not announce a policy change on social media. I stood up in this council chamber and told everyone.
Thank you. And now we'll open the debate. And the first one I've got is Councillor Christopher.
In February, I was in the strange position of actually agreeing with a Liberal Democrat MP, Mr Carmichael, from Orkney in Shetland, when he said that rural areas are badly funded, and we don't expect that to change tomorrow. What I do find that I have difficulty with is this whole concept of changing from 20 to 40 years. And I say that as a prize-winning chartered accountant of many years standing. There are four main accounting principles: accruals, going concern, prudence, are not least amongst them, and also consistency. Many of you will remember the phrase from years ago from an insurance company, you cannot be too prudential. And this is the concern here, because my training was always that where the accruals concept and prudence concept conflicted, prudence should dominate. And my concern here is clearly that this potentially opens us up to a council borrowing more money. And I take issue with the whole question of some sort of cash bonus, because effectively this is not cash. This is accounting treatment and changing the figures. And the point is that accounts don't show the true and fair view, they show a true and fair view. So accounts can always be altered, what's called creative accounting. But my concern here is that Dorset Council may end up borrowing more money, and I'm sure if I ask the Section 151 officer, can he guarantee that in the next 10 years there will not be a Section 114 notice? I don't think he could give me that guarantee. And I leave you with this analogy in terms of cash and the cash available to Dorset Council. By changing this treatment, it's a bit like a farmer revaluing his assets. It's not going to improve his cash flow, and it won't for Dorset Council. What it may do is end up with a Dorset Council borrowing more money and Dorset Council taxpayers paying the price.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher. We now have Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chairman. I was on the scrutiny debate, and I'm sure the Cabinet member is delighted that he's here rather than on holiday. I'm sure he can think of no better place to be, so welcome back. I agree with Councillor Weller in terms of prudence. She may be more prudent than me because I got conjured up images of Mary Whitehouse when she was speaking about prudence earlier on in the debate, and I fully agree with her. When it comes to council taxpayers' money, I don't believe we can be prudent enough, especially when I feel that this change is being drastically rushed through, considering we only had a budget approved by this council last month. So my main objection to it is not the actual change in policy, it's the fact that due to the fact this is being rushed through, whacked on the end of a cabinet meeting, seemingly put in at the end of this financial year due to questionable change effects that the changes to national legislation will have, that I don't believe that this chamber has got enough time to review this properly. He said he's spoken and received advice from the King's Council. The King's Council has obviously cleared this legally. If this debate was taking place next year, would the King's Council, if there was no other changes other than the ones already agreed, would the King's Council be giving the same advice?
Would you like to answer that?
Genuine question.
Yes. The advice would be the same.
Councillor Clifford, sorry, did you want to answer it or not? No. To Councillor Monks.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Monks, Bedminster Ward. Just following on from Councillor Leary's comments, I'm too on scrutiny, and as scrutiny went on, it became more confusing because I'm not a financial person, like many have already said. But the big issue for me on scrutiny is that this process has been rushed through, and actually, I might be wrong, but my interpretation of the question and the answer is that if this was debated next year, retrospectively, you can't change it. So that's why this is going through as quickly as it is. Changing the policy moving forward, there's lots of merits, and we discussed that and we agreed with that, hence the recommendation that I'm sure my colleague Chairman of Scrutiny will elaborate on. But to borrow Councillor Hope's words from the previous meeting, we owe it to our future generations. The reality is, because this is going through so quickly and we haven't had the time to scrutinise or fully understand the implications, essentially what we're being asked to do is to change the rules before the government stops us from being able to do it for a short-term gain with an unknown long-term risk, because there's no such thing as free money, And the right decisions are fairly the easy decisions. And somebody will pay for this at some point. And if I had a pound for every single time somebody said around my kitchen table or in the pub or at the local restaurant, I wish my politicians, the government councils would think long term. That's essentially why I like being ultra super prudent, because our future taxpayers will be paying for this at some point. And without the time to really give this the scrutiny it deserves, that's why I follow the lead of the scrutiny recommendation and would say in the future, absolutely fine, but rewriting the past budget, I can't support. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. Really is a question. When I bought my house, which would seem now ridiculously low, but the repairs through the years have got more and more and more for me, because obviously that is the fact of life. I came into this debate open-minded. I haven't, at the earlier point, I haven't decided. But I do know that this council over the years has been badly financed. It's by no fault of our own. The RSG has always been very, very low, particularly low. You've given us assurances from outside bodies that support us in many, many ways. My question is, are we bypassing the government legislation that would come in line? Are we trying to bypass that? If you could, during your summing up, give us that bit of thinking. Thank you.
Councillor Clifford.
Do you mind if I don't stand for that one? Thank you, Councillor Kimber. It's not legislation, it's guidance. And yes, as we've answered a couple of times already tonight, we would be in the same position. Can I just go back to Councillor Monks, who asked a couple of really good questions, actually used a really important word. So he is right in terms of a retrospective look. So the only area that the King's Council would advise against is next year we will not be able to take this year's MRP. That's absolutely fair and absolutely true, and a good challenge. The key I forgot when you said you're not sure what the risk is. Yes, I am. Our experts in-house, our external experts are calling this low risk. That's the key. And I have to say, since I've been in this position and in this council, that's not an expression I've heard very much. Everything has been medium at best, but high risk. This is low risk for the future.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple of questions. Is this something that will save us money, and how much will it save us over the coming years? And the repayments that we're making, can I just make it clear to everybody what I believe is in the paper, that our interest will stay the same for the period? So.
Councillor Clifford.
Yes, so there's, I think in the papers it shows the path that we will generate income savings. So year one, just over £6 million, and then it gradually reduces over the course of 20 years or so. The net benefit, there are two figures, there's a gross benefit and the net benefit. The net benefit will be in the region of £45 million over 10 years. There is a slight negative to that, in that because you're not setting aside so much money, then you don't have the ability to earn so much income, so much interest off the money that you're setting aside, and also you can't do any internal borrowing, or your internal borrowing is reduced. So whilst there are positives to that, there's also a negative, but the net position over 10 years, £45 million. And yes, the advantage of changing the way that we assess the interest rate on it and moving in the recommendation is that you fix the interest rate payment. That over a course of a long period, as I described earlier, and apologies to Councillor Weller if it was inelegant, is that inflation takes a huge chunk out of that money.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Northam.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the concerns about rushing, but to me, we have the opportunity to save £6 million by acting in this financial year. If we don't act in this financial year, then we don't save £6 million. But does that come with any strings? I would be taking financial advice. We've had that financial advice from our officers, and that's reassured me greatly. So to me, it seems a no-brainer. And it leads me to ask a little bit, why hasn't this been done in financial year 23-24? Why are we only thinking of this now, and why didn't we think of it earlier?
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
So thank you, Councillor Northam. I can't answer the last part of the question of why people didn't do it earlier. All I can say is the process started when we came into power. In September, the timeline started where I sat down with the finance team, and because lots of other councils have done this, I asked whether we're in a position to look at our MRP and see what flexibility there was. There was then the lull while we produced the budget, and then in December, our auditors, Grant Thornton, suggested that we should review the level of MRP. That was then continued. We got the external advice from Arling Close, and we are in a position where we are now. So things moved very quickly. From about middle of January, the advice we were getting was this is a sensible approach to take. I have to say that there's one phrase that I think will be useful for us to consider, which is the suggestion is we are paying an unnecessary burden at the moment, and so we're trying to get the balance right for the future. So reduce that unnecessary burden, smooth it out over a longer period. The opposition party will be able to answer themselves why they didn't go down that route, but had they done so from November the last year they were in power through, they'd have had 14 months worth of this benefit, which if I totted it up, might come close to something like £8.6 million. Go figure.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Suttle.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Suttle, Swanage Ward. So there's two very unfortunate people in the room. One's Beryl Ezard. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. One's Beryl Ezard and one's Bill Trite. And that's because they've had to listen to me. Beryl, I think, has had to listen to me give 13 budget speeches. Bill Trite's even more unfortunate. He's had to listen to 20, I think. So there's one recurring theme in those budget speeches, and that's prudence with the finances. So tonight, what we're arguing about, or we're not arguing actually, it's just an opinion at the end of the day. You're just going to move from what is ultra prudent to what you consider to be prudent, we would consider to be maybe slightly riskier, if you like. So it's a matter of conscience, really, whether you want to move from one policy to another. Now, people talk about all of this money that they're saving, but what's happening here is that the depreciation level, if you like, is less. So the charge to the general fund is smaller, and then on paper, that allows more money to be spent in year. You're not actually physically moving, the pot is the same. We're just moving things about. So you just have to make a decision tonight. At scrutiny, obviously there was a lot of talk about assets and various other things. It's nothing about that. We can spend the entire night arguing about things that are not important. It's just one simple question. Do you or do you not want to move from ultra prudence to a lower level? There's also the question of, in the paper, obviously, ultra prudent is low risk. There's no question of it. The question is, in your own minds, is moving to a position from that to I think Councillor Clifford did mention there is some risk, but it's so far down the line that not one person in this room will probably be alive by the time you see it. And the people who will be cursing us in 25 years' time, because that's about the timescale, none of us will be remembered, unfortunately. So I'm glad I'm not doing it, because they won't remember me, but they'll remember you.
Your colleagues aren't happy about that.
Never mind. So that is really tonight the question. Do you want to move from ultra-prudent, safe council to one that is possibly slightly riskier and in a longer term, sorry about the length of time, then there will be a point where the risk element increases. I leave it to you to decide.
Thank you, and that was exactly 3 minutes. Well done. Now I call on Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. My question's just been answered.
Thank you. So, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I mean, if you look at the recommendation, and it's for 40 years. 40 years soon goes by. And from all the advice that we've got from, Grant Thornton and others, it seems to me the right way to go. Anybody that was in business would look at it this way. And so I fully support the recommendation, because if we can save money and spend it in other ways, why not? And if you look at the interest rates on it, it's very manageable.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Tooks.
Thank you. David Took from Cranbourne Alderholt. We've heard an awful lot tonight. 50 Shades of Prudence. We've gone all the way from just prudent to ultra prudent. The word I heard at the start when we were describing prudence, or it was described to us, was excessive. Now, excessive isn't ultra. Excessive is too much. That's what the word means. And I think we need to understand that excessive prudence is as bad as no prudence. It means you get nothing done. So I think a little bit of ambition, a little bit of prudence, certainly. Oh, Gordon Brown's girlfriend was a great girl. But prudence, not excessive prudence. Thank you. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not sure that Simon will be able to answer this question, but I suspect some people in the chamber might have a recollection of it. I remember when Dorset County Council, as it was, under the stewardship of the Conservatives, got its fingers burnt in the Icelandic banking crisis. And my recollection, I hope it's correct, is that another local authority, not so far away, a district council as it happened, were using Arling Close as their advisors, and Arling Close got the call on the Icelandic banking crisis right. So if Arling Close is giving this a green light, I think that's a pretty good way to go. And if I've listened correctly to what Simon's been saying this evening, this is a reversible policy. So what's not to like about a reversible policy, particularly if it's going to save us £6 million? That seems to be a no-brainer as you introduce this element. And while people are getting exercised and worried about what's going to happen in 25 years' time, well, I think every single local authority in the country is going to be under probably on skid row in 25 years' time, the way things are going. So let's not worry about what happens in 25 years' time. Let's worry about what we'll be doing in the next few years during the course of our stewardship of this authority.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Biggs.
Richard Biggs, Property Assets and Economic Growth. I did listen today to the recording. Myself, Nick Ireland, Mike Baker, were at the Innovation Park at the time all day, so we couldn't attend. But I was interested to hear the conversation, and there seemed to be a lot of confusion over, I heard people mention county farms, I heard people mention hotels. You know, these are assets that we own, they're not ones that we bear interest on, and I think that was explained later on. Once that was clarified, we got into better understanding of assets of 40 years that were not actually extending the life of those assets. I think that was all explained. So the real crux of this is a sensible thing, but it's not, and it shouldn't be, and it's quite clear in the legislation or the guidance that it's not about to do it for financial saving. It's That is part of it. But if you're being prudent, if you're being ultra prudent, ultra cautious, you're not being prudent. So being prudent, so being over cautious is not good for the taxpayer. As we can see, we can change the profiling with that to benefit the taxpayer. I think that's what you need to get your head round. This is a no-brainer, common sense, and just to delay it, we're not retrospectively doing it in breach of the legislation or the guidance. So I really struggle to find why it's being made such a, sorry, Andrew, it got very political, and I thought unnecessarily so, because I think there were good challenges that needed to be addressed, but it shouldn't be political. And I think if you were there, you said 3 U-turns about, budget process, and that was irrelevant. Good one.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, can we move on to Councillor Lacey Clark would like to come back now.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to because I wasn't told that I'd be speaking first, that's why I didn't have anything prepared. And I wanted to take some time to see what the thoughts were and why people didn't just automatically agree with what scrutiny said, which obviously was the position I came at it from, very different to Councillor Clifford. I've heard my good friend and colleague, Councillor Christopher, speak twice this evening, maybe 3 times, I forget, but none of the times with a good quote. I'm going to go with, is it a Desiree? Lies, damn lies, and statistics? So nothing you have been told this evening isn't 100% accurate and true. But statistics can show a lot of things. And I think in this particular situation, we've been given a lot of statistics on how this is going to free up or save us money in the short term. You'll notice what they haven't said is how much it will cost us in the long term. And in the scrutiny meeting, one of the questions we asked one of the officers present, I won't use names, was to know when it stopped being a saving and when it started becoming a burden. And we were told around the 20-year mark, if I want to be correct. We asked how much it would then be a burden of. Fortuitously, those numbers weren't there on the day, just the saving ones. We asked for those numbers to be sent out to us afterwards. They haven't been. We have not received them yet. So we are being presented the statistics which support this. We're being presented the statistics that it's been signed off by our council. It is legal. We can do it. We're not being told the fact that actually this was rushed to scrutiny as an emergency to be added onto it, because I was told as head of place scrutiny, we will not be allowed to do this after the 1st of April, so it needs to come sooner. We're now hearing we can do this after the 1st of April. I believe that is true. But I think what we can't do is change the revenue grant for 2008 to now. We can only change going forward. I think that's the nuance there. I'm head shaken. So either I was misled to begin with, or I'm being misled now. It's one or the other. Either way, that leaves me with that itchy feeling on the back of my head. What isn't in the paper? The previous advisors were very clear that actually we shouldn't do this. We're now being told that actually we can, and in business it's normal. And I agree. As a businessman, I know in business 40 years actually is absolutely okay and usable as an average. We're not in business. We are holding residents' money. It is our duty to safeguard them a lot more than businesses safeguard shareholders' money. And what we are doing, well, still prudent, and to be clear, prudent is binary. The council's either prudent or it's not. Any other words we use on prudent is something we're adding onto it. Yeah? And I think any drop in the level that we decide of our prudence is negative. However, we'd have to drop a lot lower to stop being prudent as a council. I don't see why we would put a burden on future generations from assets that we've already bought and secured and have the debt against. I agree that going forward, from next year onwards, looking at having the lifespan of the asset match how long the asset will actually be used for is a fantastic idea. And I wholeheartedly support that going forward. I think 25 years is far too short for some assets. However, I don't see any evidence of us actually assessing this debt against the lifetimes of the assets. We are merely using an average we hope is correct to reassess previous. And I'm only against reassessing the previous debt, not going forward. And a lot of the positives we are being sold tonight is on the going forwards. And that I agree with. Yeah. And I think, marry in haste, repent in leisure. Let's look at this properly and factor it in to next year's budget going forward. Let's just be sensible and safe about this. Why rush it through now for £6 million, which it's a reversible decision, but it's only reversible if you repay all the money you've already lost out of that pot. So if you repay, so it's not reversible if that money's been used since then. Yeah, in reality, that's the way it works. And I would urge us not to be so political, because we've heard political stuff on both sides. Can we just make a good decision for the people?
Thank you, Councillor Lacey-Clark. I gave you longer as Chair of Scrutiny. So, yes. Now we move on to Councillor Ezard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Beryl Ezard, Wareham Ward. And I can just correct Gary Suttle from Swanage to say, yes, I have served under him as an opposition for 20 years, since 2004 on the District Council. So got your figures wrong there. But anyway, I would like to say, being economical with the truth is something that we've all had to play with over the years. And what I would like to say is to point out what it says in 5.2 in the papers. The Council's chief objective when borrowing money has been to strike an appropriately low-risk balance between securing low interest costs and achieving certainty of those costs over the period of which funds are required. The flexibility to negotiate the loans should be the Council's long-term plans change as a secondary objective. I'd like the people to think about that, and that is true in this case. And we should actually take that forward. And I wholeheartedly believe that both of these recommendations should be taken forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll call Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Steve Mercer for Blackmore Vale. Beryl Ezard accused me of not reading the papers in a meeting earlier this week, and I have to say this paper is very long and very complex. But people have talked about risk, but have we talked about cost? Because I looked at, if I borrowed £1 million and paid it back, capital and interest, over 25 years, it will cost me £625,000 in interest. If I borrowed the same £1 million and repaid it over 40 years, it will cost me £1 million in interest. So yes, there is a short-term saving in scheduling this debt over a longer period, if I've read the papers correctly, but there is an additional cost for that debt. It's not as simple as just a risk calculation. There is a cost calculation that goes alongside it. But if I've got that completely wrong, I do apologise. But the cost element didn't seem to be taken into account.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are a couple of points there. Absolutely right, there is a cost, and in my opening remarks I tried to describe what the level of cost was, offset. Yes, it is going to be the extra money you described, but it's offset by inflation, so in 40 years' time that will be a very different value to that money. There are a couple of points that were raised by Councillor Lacey-Clark, one of which was completely inaccurate. Our previous advisors did not recommend against us doing this. It just wasn't recommended for us to do this. They weren't asked to do the review. That was. I'm just looking to see if I'm getting that's the message I'm getting from the finance officers. They didn't rule against it. They weren't asked to look at it, and Grant Thornton asked us to review.
Would the Thank you. Now, sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair, I lost my microphone there, and if anyone was observing, there was a bit of discussion off the microphone, and perhaps if people need to get further clarity, then they should seek that. What I would say is the Councillor Suttle, as ever, raised a really good point about it's all about prudence in the end and what level of prudence. So we have been told from our external advisors that the level of prudence that we are showing is too high and is putting an unnecessary burden. We are removing the unnecessary part of that burden and trying to make it, I don't want to go down this degradations of prudence. We're just trying to make it prudent. It is not going to be less than prudent. It's not going to be slightly more than prudent. It is being described as a prudent approach. And it's backed up by low risk because we're going to repay on an annuity basis with a fixed interest rate. That enables us to say it is a low risk because we can plan forward many years for the full 40 years. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Beddoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a simple question, really. Since Dorset Council was created, we've all been, I think, cross-party quite proud that we build our budget in a very collective way. The Liberal Democrat group have continued that, which is welcome. But Councillor Clifford, you mentioned that this process was started back in September and you were receiving advice. I've tried really hard to not politicise it and to keep an open mind, but I'm really struggling, and it is a long paper, I may have missed it. If this process was started back in September and this advice was being received and you were having meetings with Grant Thornton or receiving advice from Grant Thornton, why wasn't this part of the budget building process? Because that would have given everybody a really good run at it, opportunity to understand it. And if there is a reason that it wasn't part of the budget setting process, which was open and we could all contribute to, why is it not being planned in for next year? Because then we could have that same opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's, sorry, I'll sit down again. I think that's a very fair challenge. So the conversation started in September between myself and the officers. The advice we got from Island Close was delivered on the 18th of February. So it was during the course of our audits being signed off and our budget being produced. So there was no opportunity to share it.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Jefferson.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants Ward. Madam Chairman, I began listening to this discussion with an open mind, but I've heard two things this evening that have helped me make up my mind that I absolutely cannot support this recommendation. And those two things are, first of all, we were told several times by Cabinet members, this is a no-brainer. This is not a no-brainer. This is a very important decision that we are making on behalf of current and future residents. I think to say that this phrase no-brainer is patronising, unhelpful and inaccurate. It's not a no-brainer with respect. The second thing I heard from across the chamber is never mind what's going to happen in 25 years, we'll get the 6.5 million now. That is the very essence of imprudence. That's a prudent council does not say, we'll take the money now and the devil take the hindmost. We are here to look after the people who are going to be living in this area in 25 years' time. And I think it's frankly imprudent, and it confirms my reservations about this, that we would even sit here in this council and say it doesn't matter about what happens in 25 years' time, because it really, really does. And it's our responsibility to consider that. So those two remarks in this chamber have helped me make up my mind that I really cannot support this proposal.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of points I'd like to make, if I may, and then there's a question. I am very concerned, and the comment has just been passed on what we're doing to future generations. At the scrutiny meeting, I made it very clear that I was looking at what happens to my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and residents of this area. This is why this is such an important decision that we have to make tonight. If Grant Thornton were asked about this and gave the go-ahead, I'm confused as to why we're now saying we have to put that money to one side until Grant Thornton have done the audit. The two seem to have a little bit of a conflict with each other. I'm not going to go on too much because I think a lot's been said tonight, but I would say that when we took the vote at scrutiny, there was not a single person from any party that voted against the scrutiny recommendation. Please bear that in mind.
Yeah.
So I think the point about Grant Thornton is worth responding to. So Grant Thornton were asked for their opinion on what our approach was, and they had their opinion was it seemed sensible. They will carry out a full audit as part of their normal work across the whole of the council, a full financial audit, and it will of course become part of that. If that opinion changes, or if that financial audit flags up that when you measure this proposal against all the spending of the council, that they no longer have that same opinion, then we'll reverse that policy. We'll reverse that funding, and that's why we're putting into a savings.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. An interesting debate on a very important subject. I think I scrutinised 4 budgets during my time as the chairman of Place and Resources Scrutiny. Now, the first year, it wasn't in my ownership. So I scrutinised 4 budgets, and if my memory is correct, I think we were looking at this council being in a relatively safe period until 2038, I think, was my recollection of it, after which the wheels definitely come off. In that time, that safe period has reduced considerably, and this council finds itself, like many local government authorities, in a position financially difficult, and it's only getting worse. And most of that, as we all know, is paying from central government, irrespective of what government was in Westminster. The fact is that over the last 40 years, there's been inadequate funding for local government authorities like ours. Now, I'm satisfied that the portfolio holder and the officers of finance have done everything they possibly can to try and make this as safe a policy as possible. To my knowledge, I know we've got a couple of accountants in the room, and we've got an auditor, we've got a couple councillors that have served within banks, but the vast majority of us, and I've sat on audit and governance committees, I've sat on finance committees, I'm not fiscally or accountancy trained, and I think that most of the members in this chamber aren't. And so the point I'm getting to it is that I think, another P word, I think every precaution has been taken. The policy is reversible, and the money is going to be ring-fenced in case, when that audit is done, there is a different view that comes back, in which case the money can be paid back. And I think from the position that we're in, with the financial difficulties that councils like ours have, I would rather be in a position that we survive to fight for tomorrow, rather than be in a position where we are so starved of cash that we're not able to continue and bring in a balanced budget in the future, and commissioners have to be brought in, which only enable us to borrow more money and get further in debt. So I will be supporting this tonight. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Councillor Brian Hope, portfolio holder for Customer Culture, Community Engagement, and ward member for Westham and Weymouth. And like most, I came into this open-minded through the process. Obviously, it's been worked out, and we've been involved. However, I understand the concerns around that 25 years' time, because I'm probably, hopefully, going to be one of the lucky ones still to be here in 25 years' time. And it may be myself and Councillor O'Leary chairing across the chamber. But we need to take decisions for the there and now. We've already spoke about during the budget setting process, previous council meetings, cabinet meetings, about our aspirations for Dorset now. We've got an Our Future Council programme, which, if we get that right, will save this council a lot of money. We've got a housing programme which could support our most vulnerable residents, again, saving the council a lot of money. The money that we could be saving now to invest in our services could free up lots more cash for this council to be used in different ways. And it may be in 5, 10, 15 years' time that we review this policy and start being extremely prudent again to pay off the interest quicker. But right now, that money has a better purpose spent on frontline services, investment in our future council, investment in our housing, investment in our communities. And that's why I urge all members to support this paper this evening and focus on our council now to ensure a better council in the future.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before the seconder speaks? Now's your chance. No? Right, Councillor Ireland then.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Nick Ireland, Crossways Ward. I'll keep this really brief, and I won't take the 3 minutes. I was really tempted to open this with playing some music on my phone from Susie and the Banshees. I didn't. If you know, you know. I appreciate the contribution to Councillor Christopher. I recognise your qualifications, though I do note that you weren't the finance lead for the previous administration. Councillor Suttle, thank you for yours, and thank you for your discussion about prudence. The paper in front of us has 2 recommendations. It is in 2 parts. It's about the now, as Councillor Hope has just said, and also about the future. The reality is, if we pass the first bit, we get 6 million quid. We get it now, it's going to be ring-fenced. Hopefully the auditors will say, yes, we can use it, and we'll use it to do things. You know, I'm really keen for it not to fill in the budget deficit, the overspend, and I'm looking at our section 151, but we shouldn't be using it to fill in the budget overspend in the budget we've inherited. We want to use it to spend on prioritising roads, schools, anything, anything but filling a budget hole. Thank you very much. Section 114, that's the other part. So as Councillor Hope and Councillor Bott have just said, we need to spend this money now. Does anybody in this chamber really think that this decision we take now is going to cause us to go bust? It isn't. We know what's going to cause us to go bust. It's successive governments failing to fund local government properly. It's about adult social care. It's about local government finance. It's not to ignore the future, but we can spend this money now, and it'll have a purpose and it'll have an impact. Somerset County Council, or Somerset Council was mentioned. There was a SIPFA report that came out last week, an independent review. SIPFA, an independent body, they blamed the vast majority of Somerset Council's current predicament, and we know what the situation they're in, on the previous county council. And basically, they froze council tax for 6 years, and I quote, leading to funding shortfalls each future year in perpetuity, millions of pounds essentially wasted. And that's the reason Somerset are in such a difficult problem. 6 million quid now is worth more than 6 million quid in the future. We can spend it now. We are going to be prudent. It's slightly less risk, as Councillor Suttle has said, and I recommend both to the council. Please support both. It is money we can use, and we'll make a difference with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we come to the vote on the recommendation. The recommendation has 2 parts, and we'll be voting on each one separately. And we will have your votes will be counted, so the names will be read out, and you have to say either for, against, or abstain. So we're ready to call out the names.
Why are we not using the handsets?
Because we had the cabinet beforehand, and it would take a lot of organising within the time scale. If you want to have handsets, we can wait another 10 minutes, but we decided to do it by hand. We also hire them in, evidently. We haven't got them here today, so it will have to be hands. So to put your hands up very clearly when your name is called out. We're ready to vote now on recommendation 1.
Thank you, Chairman. The recommendation is in your papers, in the agenda for recommendation. Yeah. This is recommendation A in the paper, in the agenda papers.
I'll read it out. The recommendation is that the Council approves the Treasury Management Strategy and accompanying MRP statement for 24-25 and the charging methodology for pre-2008 capital financing requirement, moving to a 40-year period on a straight line basis, and for post-2008 capital financing requirement, moving to a 40-year period on an annuity basis. That is number 1.
Councillors, we will now take the recorded vote. I will call out your name. Just please state clearly whether you are voting for or against the recommendation or if you wish to abstain. Councillor John Andrews. For. Councillor Jindy Atwell. For. Councillor Mike Baker. For. Councillor Shane Bartlett. For. Councillor Belinda Borden. For. Councillor Laura Beddoe. Against. Councillor Derek Beer. For. Councillor Matt Bell. For. Councillor Richard Biggs. For. Councillor Bridget Bolwell. For. Councillor David Bolwell. For. Councillor Alex Brenton. For. Councillor Ray Bryan.
Against.
Councillor Andy Canning.
For.
Councillor Will Chakawata.
For.
Councillor Simon Christopher.
Against.
Councillor Simon Clifford.
For.
Councillor Tony Coombs. Councillor Barry Cooper. Councillor Richard Crabb.
For.
Councillor Peter Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Neil Isaac.
For.
Councillor Beryl Ezard.
For.
Councillor Scott Florek.
For.
Councillor Spencer Flower.
Against.
Councillor Les Fry.
For.
Councillor Simon Gibson.
Against.
Councillor Barry Gorringe. Councillor Hannah Hobbs-Chell. Councillor Sally Holland. Councillor Ryan Holloway. Councillor Ryan Hope. Councillor Nick Ireland. Councillor Jack Jeans. Councillor Sherry Jesperson. Councillor Carol Jones. Councillor Stella Jones. Councillor Paul Kimber. Councillor Knock Lacey Clark.
Against.
Councillor Robin Legg. Councillor Craig Monks.
Against.
Councillor Steve Mercer. Councillor David Northam. Councillor Louis O'Leary.
Against.
Councillor John Orell. Councillor Emma Parker. Councillor Andrew Parry. Councillor Byron Quayle. Councillor Pete Roper. Councillor David Shortell. Councillor Andy Skeets. Councillor Jane Somper. Councillor Duncan Surrey House. Councillor Andrew Starr. Councillor Gary Suttle. Councillor Claire Sutton. Councillor Roland Tarr. Councillor David Taylor. Councillor Jill Taylor. Councillor Andy Todd. Councillor David Took. Councillor Bill Trite. Councillor Claudia Webb. Councillor Kate Weller. Councillor Sarah Williams. Councillor Ben Wilson. Councillor Carl Wood. Thank you.
Just wait for the counting up of that one before we vote on part 2.
So, Jonathan. Kate has got.
Thank you. We've got 44 in favour, 23 against and no abstentions. And I think we'll use our handsets in future. But for the second one, we'll do it the same way. The second part is... The Council approves the Treasury Management Strategy and accompanying MRP statement for 2025 to 26 and the change in methodology for pre-2008 capital financing requirement, moving to a 40-year period on a straight line basis, and for post-2008 capital financing requirement, moving to a 4-year period on an annuity basis. So we'll do it the same way.
Councillor John Andrews. Councillor Jindy Atwell. Councillor Mike Baker. Councillor Shane Bartlett. Councillor Belinda Borden. Councillor Laura Beddow. Councillor Derek Beer. Councillor Matt Bell. Councillor Richard Biggs. Councillor Bridget Bolwell. Councillor David Bolwell. Councillor Alex Brenton. Councillor Ray Bryan. Councillor Andy Canning. Councillor Will Chakawata. Councillor Simon Christopher. Councillor Simon Clifford. Councillor Tony Coombs. Councillor Barry Cooper. Councillor Richard Crabb. Councillor Peter Dickinson. Councillor Neil Isaac. Councillor Beryl Ezard. Councillor Scott Florek. Councillor Spencer Flower. Councillor Les Fry. Councillor Simon Gibson. Councillor Barry Gorringe. Councillor Hannah Hobbs-Chell. Councillor Sally Holland. Councillor Ryan Holloway. Councillor Ryan Hope. Councillor Nick Ireland. Councillor Jack Jeans. Councillor Sherry Jesperson. Councillor Carol Jones. Councillor Stella Jones. Councillor Paul Kimber. Councillor Knocklacey Clark. Councillor Robin Legg. Councillor Craig Monks. Councillor Steve Mercer. Councillor David Northam. Councillor Louis O'Leary. Councillor John Orell. Councillor Emma Parker. Councillor Andrew Parry. Councillor Byron Quayle. Councillor Pete Roper. Councillor David Shortell. Councillor Andy Skeets. Councillor Jane Somper. Councillor Sari House. Councillor Andrew Starr. Councillor Gary Suttle. Councillor Claire Sutton. Councillor Roland Tarr. Councillor David Taylor. Councillor Jill Taylor. Councillor Andy Todd. Councillor David Took. Councillor Bill Trite. Councillor Claudia Webb. Councillor Kate Weller. Councillor Sarah Williams. Councillor Ben Wilson. And Councillor Carl Wood. Thank you.
I think the recommendation has been approved if we want to wait for the actual figures, but we'll wait. It's the same as the last one, 44 in favour, 23 against and no abstentions. Now can I move on to item 7, there are no urgent items. Item 8, no exempt business, and thank you all for coming, and see you again here in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.